Welcome back, Tribe. I have an interesting one here on the Incel movement.
Let me give you this. This is why I think the beginning of the Incel movement and the black pill movement was born out of pickup artistry. The origin, if you trace it back using internet history, of the Incel black pill ideology was I think it was a subreddit or a website called PUA Hate, Pickup Artist Hate. And what it was a group of men who had been through the pipeline of pickup artistry and come out the other side with a very jaded and even more jaded view of the world.
More jaded.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. So what happens if a guy learns old school, mid-20 noughts pickup artistry is you realize that there is a particular set of actions, a script that you can run, which makes it more likely that a woman is going to go to bed with you.
Right.
But what you realize when you do that, as you learn how to neg and do Kino escalation and tell them that story about the midget fight outside or whatever your script is that you're running, you then begin to see just how far away that person is from the person that you actually show up as.
Right.
Who you are and this extravagant persona that you need to convolute into existence in order to get this woman into bed.
So I have a unique experience with this because I actually went through the pickup artist thing through college when me and my friends would go out every single day, basically every single day, at least Taco Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday was like usually a kickback at somebody's house, but it was damn near every single day. We had nothing else to do. We were dumb and we thought women were the end all be all and that's what it meant to be a man, but we ran game and we would talk about, how to navigate. Essentially, it's manipulation. I mean, what else could you really call it? It's behaving in a certain way that gets you an outcome that you want when it doesn't really represent who you actually are. The issue with running game on girls is that script he talks about is actually mind-numbingly brutal when you go on multiple dates, run the same script, and you get the same outcome. In a way, you get let down. And I mean horribly, because imagine you're really into a girl. Imagine you go on a date, you look at her as potential, and then you run your script and it works. Your script then, although it gives you a high success rate with women, is also a way that you start filtering women for them being good and bad, long-term versus short-term, putting them in the fun zone or marriage material. So it becomes disheartening in a way because you start to see human nature for what it really is. And it really does break your heart, man. As much as you want to buy into the Disney fairy tales, as much as you want to buy into this soulmate idea, this one person that's out there for you that's so special, so different, can be your best friend, it's bullshit. It really is. Somebody can run game on your girl or you can run game on a girl and it works damn near 100% of the time. If you satisfy the 3 tenets we've talked about on the channel, time and time again, right guy, right time, right place. For example, the nightclub, you're at the right place. It is the right time because she's in a club, probably in a pair of twos. Imagine that. So she's out there looking for some. And you just have to be the right guy, which is running your programming. And it's usually a 10 out of 10 you're getting laid. As long as you satisfied those 3 criteria and you applied your game, you're good to go. And seeing somebody you think has potential respond in a almost robotic fashion, just like all the other girls, really starts to make you distance yourself from taking women seriously in general. And it's an unfortunate thing to say, but this is also why F-boys tend to look at women as a joke or use them as a piece of meat or have their fun, play the field, never have any intention of getting serious with the woman. It's because they see a woman's biological programming at its foundational core when you're running your counter programming and you're constantly getting the same output. And it doesn't matter if she's a doctor, because it's worked on doctors, it's worked on lawyers, it's worked at the chick at McDonald's, it works on the broke girl that's extremely hot working at the clothing store, and it works on the chick that's all right, that has a rocket scientist brain and shouldn't be falling for any of this. It doesn't matter. It just works. Why it works, we could always dive into that later, but game hits these biological markers in one fell swoop of like questioning, teasing, negging, and all the other tactics that they use. And we didn't even know they had these names at the time. We were just constantly doing them naturally because that's what we noticed would work. We'd poke fun at one another and then they would laugh, and then we'd start teasing them a little bit. They would laugh harder. We'd start to notice which ones were into us. Then we'd give out compliments, push, pull, get cold, get warm. You know, all these things we were starting to learn naturally as we were talking to all these girls. And it had to have been hundreds of girls that we hit on, man, thousands. I've lost count, honestly. In one summer alone, it was out of control every single night. And that does leave a mark on you. You do look at everything differently, and it's not for the better. And this is why I tell guys, be careful getting into hookup culture. Be careful seeing the other side of the game, being the other guy, because it does make trust difficult. It does leave a stain. And if you're not introspective and careful about letting these experiences consume you, you may come across a bunch of women that may be good for you that you'll pass up because of prior experiences clouding your judgment. But even some of my uglier friends, going back to the incel portion of this, they would run game and be extremely successful too. We had one really ugly friend that was super charismatic. I mean, he maxed his game out on 10. None of us could compete. He just took control of the room completely. He was the loudest in the room, but very good at drawing in the energy and bringing crowds of people to us and being the life of the party. So that guy dominated the social setting, and he won, and he got laid a ton of times because of that. And that dude was not good looking at all, but his status, his perceived status within the group was so high simply because of the energy he brought to the entire room. Now, I'm wondering, if you run this game, how would you know, how would you become this incel that Chris is talking about if the programming you're using fails because the underlying factor of you not being the it guy, so you didn't succeed anyways? There is a jaded portion, like I said earlier, from running the programming, seeing it work, and there being a big gap between who you are genuinely and authentically as a person and this person you're pretending to be that's running the game. You're pretending to be this mysterious guy, this funny guy, this guy that tells crazy stories, this dude, you know, that is a concoction simply made up to elicit a response out of her. And once you see the gap of that, it puts you off. But does it turn you into an incel? I don't know. I don't think I would agree with that, because most of the guys that run game find success. Truly, the ones that apply themselves, take care of themselves, do all the things that the coaches tell them, whatever it is, like, you know, trim your beard, hygiene, make sure your breath smells nice, get nice clothes, get a nice body, make sure you work out. Like, when you really do those things to the T, you will succeed. But for the guys that are half-assing it and have and are running this programming without the foundationals being hit, the right guy, right time, right place, for the most people, it's just right guy. You just have to, that's one of the most important ones, right guy. And most guys don't hit that because they're not taking care of either their body, their game/programming sucks, charisma, no energy, yada, yada, yada. There's so many things that could go wrong. You could literally you could have it in the bag, have all those markers, and then talk yourself out of it by saying a stupid joke that just flips the switch off for her, and then next guy. But still, I would say that the incels are the ones that are watching it all happen, that have tried hitting on girls, that have run, quote, programming game, and have failed miserably. I do think, and I know for sure, that there is a subset of men that simply are unattractive. I mean, let's get to the root of this issue. I think this community was born out of a select group of men that tried to apply red pill tactics, but were genetically unfit. We'll be completely brutally real. No woman looks at them. They are below average in women's eyes. They probably elicit a disgusting feeling from women that makes them recoil when the guy approaches. Maybe a lot of that is self-inflicted too, but genuinely, some guys just got dealt a shitty hand in life, biologically speaking, attraction-wise, SMV, whatever you want to call it. So for those men that have dabbled in these communities, have tried to run game and failed, I think when they see their friends, this has to be like a peer thing. They go out together and they have a friend or an acquaintance or a guy that they're in the general vicinity of, and they see this guy run game, probably shitty game, to be honest, because the more attractive you are, the shittier your game is allowed to be. So they see by extension their friends or colleagues or whatever succeed where they fail over and over again, get passed up over and over again, get horrendous responses from women over and over again. And then that leads to the resentment, because a lot of these guys are involuntarily celibate. They are sexless. They've been that way for years. That builds up, some pent up resentment, some anger, some angst. There's a lot of energy you got to get out there. and they have no outlet. So they become enraged at women and focus all their attention on women. But I think that's how an incel actually starts. A portion of the pickup artists found themselves to be in such low SMV that no matter what game they applied, they would always fail spectacularly. And so you get enough of those men together and they start to develop a new set of strategies or tactics or realizations about their current situation and why they are specifically failing. And then voila, you get enough of these guys together and putting all those brains and coming up with new terminology and why shit's happening to them differently than every other guy that they're seeing succeed otherwise. And then boom, Black Pill is born, incel ideology is born. You get all this stuff like Chads and Stacys and Tyrones and all the terminology that has popped up.
Makes you feel
worse even.
You feel the gap between where you are and what you have to do in order to achieve the thing that you want. Now, what you don't realize is that there are a million other ways that you could become sufficiently charming to get this person to like you. This is
by actually doing it, for example.
This is just one that happens to be robust and easy enough to write down in a book and easy enough for most guys to replicate.
It's basically a form of scripted psychopathy. So what a psychopath does is feign competence, right? So most psychopaths are very emotionally stable. And so one of the early stage markers for competence is self-possession and calmness. And so if you're not an anxious person, you've got an edge on that already. And most psychopaths are very high in emotional stability. And so they look confident because confident people tend not to be that nervous. Like if you're doing something you're expert at, well, you're not nervous because you know how to do it. Okay, so the lack of nervousness is a hint to competence. Well, you can feign that. You can feign competence. You can feign confidence. That's what the pickup artists teach. Now, I would say there's even some utility in what they do, right? Because if you're dependent and bitter and resentful and charmless and self-destructive and nervous and socially unskilled, the probability that you're going to be successful with women is very, very low. Okay, so you should be other than who you are. Now, if you start putting on this persona, then you could think about that as a new suit of clothes, and you could learn through that how to fill in the gaps.
Fake it until you make it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But if you take on that without doing the effort necessary to integrate that in a genuine way, then all that's happening is that you're being rewarded for being fake, right? And that's part of the problem with that too, is that you're practicing learning how to manipulate people in a psychopathic way. And if you practice that, of course you're going to become jaded. Like there's nothing more jaded than a psychopath. I mean, that's the ultimate extreme of jadedness. And if you practice manipulating, especially if the women happen to be reasonably good women, if you practice manipulating them and you're successful, then you're learning to be one horrible person. Now, as your completely useless, unproductive, and undesirable former self, you weren't exactly stellar to begin with, but substituting psychopathy for that was sort of like substituting cynicism for naivety. Now, as a complex problem, I mean, part of the reason that people like Andrew Tate are so attractive to young guys is because they do put up that confident, that false confidence. Tate's a complicated guy because it's not all false. Real people are complicated the way that like villains in comic books aren't. Tate's a fighter. It's clearly the case that he's got a certain degree of physical bravery. That's real. All right. There's an element of what he says that's very attractive to bedroom basement dwelling losers, because he's at least there out in the world, taking the blows, and he's got a fast car and he's flashy and he's attractive to women. But a lot of what he's done, especially with women, doesn't just border into the psychopathic, it crosses the line. And that's not a good model. It's not an optimal model for people who are trying to progress. But it's a strange thing because just as cynicism is an improvement over naivety, right, the capacity to be dark is an improvement over the lack of ability to be dark at all. And so
Inept.
Tate is attractive in the way that the shadow beckons to people who are undeveloped, right? Because it does. It's like you're neurotic and you're dependent and you're repressed because you're immature and harmless. Well, one way out of that is to stop being harmless. And one of the things you can say about Tate is that he's not harmless. Right. Well, it's a virtue. Now, it's a virtue that has to be bracketed. It's like cynicism is a virtue compared to naivety, but it's not virtuous in and of itself. It's a step on the way. And so maybe you can learn how to feign confidence and you can learn how that works, and maybe that's an improvement. I had a guy in my clinical practice who got involved with the pickup artist community, and he taught me a lot about it. And one of the exercises that their initiates had to do was to go out and ask 50 women for their phone number in one day. And that's a great exercise, and I'm not
exposure therapy, approach anxiety.
Absolutely. Getting over your fear of rejection, right? Yeah. And 50 times will do that, because you're going to get rejected the vast majority of
50 times.
But, likely 50 times. Although generally that wasn't people's experience. You know, if they were even vaguely skilled, they'd at least get a false phone number out of the deal. But then they learned that the rejection wasn't as catastrophic as they thought. But more importantly, they learned that they could continue moving forward in the face of rejection.
So the thing that it makes me think about there is intellectual humility and how tightly people hold on to their beliefs, that if you believe that you are always going to be right, that there is nothing to learn outside of you, and that any kind of admission that you might be wrong is tantamount to destruction, it does exactly the same thing. You need to, and it goes back to asking stupid questions, being prepared to ask the stupid questions and look not like the most informed person in the room, but also importantly, nowhere near the most stupid person in the room, because you're the one that's asking the question.
Well, the stupidest person in the room is the person who doesn't know and won't ask. Or even worse, who doesn't know and won't ask and acts like they know. That's not good at all.
There's from your...
See, that's part of that idea that you should love your enemy. So you might say, well, why should you do that? Well, your enemy is going to be your harshest critic. Now, it's possible that if you have a very good enemy, that he will show you flaws in your character that you didn't know were there. And so it's a very strange way of looking at the world, to think that you should welcome an attack. This is right. I'm saying that with all due caution, let's say. The more vicious the attack, the more of your potential hidden flaws might be revealed.
Have you found that to be true?
Oh, definitely. But I've also found that the attacks force you to contend with it, to see if it's there, right? To test it. I suppose the attacks that have come after me that have been most successful, they're almost always journalists. And they're usually British female journalists, but not always.
We produce a nation of hard-hitting journalists.
Yeah, well, and faith in journalists is the lowest in the UK and anywhere in the Western world. And I can see why, but there's some advantage. There's some real advantage to facing someone. It's a Pharisee problem. In the Gospels, Christ was always contending with these Pharisees. And what the Pharisees were always trying to do was to lay a verbal trap for him. So
is a Pharisee a person?
Pharisee was a Jewish sect.
Okay.
And the Pharisees were very legalistic in their interpretation of Mosaic law. And so they were hypocritical, the way they're portrayed in the Gospels. And they're hypocritical by the book moralists. And most of their morality was for show. They liked to pray in public. They liked to be seen being holy. At least that's the criticisms that are levied against them. And what they're always trying to do in the gospel accounts is to lay a verbal trap for Christ so that they can expose him as a heretic and kill him, right? So every single thing they say is a snare of some sort. And there's lots of journalists like that. Nellie Bowles, who wrote an article about me for the New York Times, which was a very devastating article in many ways and very serpentine and subtle. She, 3 years later, she wrote another article about what it was like to work for the New York Times when she was working there and the tricks that the journalists played, including her. And she said that the game was to devastate someone else's reputation in the attempt to boost yours, right? So you could think about it as a game of comparative moral standing. So the journalist's trick is to trick you into saying something that will end your career, essentially.
Their social status stands on the shoulders of yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so now the advantage to being in a situation like that is that you have to if you step extremely carefully, and you're fortunate, then you evade the traps, and then the interview tilts hard in your favor.
Yeah.
And so the interviews that have done me the most good in the long run were the two interviews that were most hostile. One by Channels 4,
Griffin?
Kathy Newman.
Kathy Griffin.
And Kathy at least had a sense of humor. Another one by Helen Lewis, who had no sense of humor at all and doesn't seem to have learned anything at all in the interim. But I think that one has 80 million views now, twice as many as the Kathy Newman interview. Like, it just keeps racking up views. And it was because Helen Lewis, she has like 50 tricks or 100 tricks. Kathy had like 4, and they were pretty blunt. And she had a sense of humor about them. But Helen Lewis, she was just all tricks, and lots of them, and smart, and it's quite something to talk to someone who's quite smart and quite educated, but all tricks.
Here's what the comments say. Calling incels a movement is like saying the homeless are a movement. There's no movement. The word movement implies that there's a unified set of ideas and a leadership structure. There's not. And they did call Jordan the king of incels, huh? What? That's so insane. The guy's married and has children. It's the furthest thing from being an incel. It's just, like falsely labeling somebody something you don't even understand what it means. You just think, ooh, bad. This thing bad. It's like the right-wing extremism label. They just slap it on anybody that doesn't agree with their agenda. Automatically, you're just a right-wing extremist. You work out, you go to the gym, right-wing extremist, supremacist. We live in interesting times. We can say that much. Yeah, it's not a movement. A community at best. It's one that's growing rapidly. We have to be completely honest with this, man. There is a growing number of men that are increasingly lost in this world, have absolutely no tools to navigate it, no father figures present. They most likely come from broken homes. They've been feminized, which has left them jaded. They have no success with women and probably, for the most part, never will. Quite a few are stuck in the mental trap of feeling that this is the end all be the all for them and that they were dealt a hand of cards in life that they can never win with. I've met and talked to a couple of these kinds of guys, and a couple of them have joined our server over on Discord. And for the most part, it is self-imposed. If you objectively rate this person on SMV, I remember one in particular that DM'd me and I said, send me some pictures, I'll give you some pointers and show me what you're dressing like, yada, yada. The dude had a 6-pack. It was the most mind-blowing. I was expecting like that meme of that dude with like the disheveled looking beard. He's like fat as shit. He just looks like mega doomer, Cheetos, Mountain Dew drinking like that. I was expecting the absolute worst. The dude was shredded, veins on his abs. He looked like a model, honestly. I looked at this guy and I was like, holy shit, dude. You're like objectively probably better looking than me, for real, seriously. How are you having issues? Then I got on a call with the guy because it was blowing my mind. So interesting. Getting a call with the guy and then immediately, I could tell just the inflections of how he says words, his sentences, like the energy he was giving off was very squirrely, fucking weird, anxiety driven, just awkward. It's all in here because as the guy slowed down his speech, stopped raising his, just got low. Bro, just talk to me one-on-one. Relax. Just two dudes. If he changed just a few small things, these alterations, he would have insane success. And he was an interesting little case study. And I started noticing this thing. Not all of them are shredded. Not all of them got veins on their abs or has like a fucking chiseled jawline like this dude. But for the most part, I've noticed that the problem with incels is psychological more than physical. Now, there is a legitimate, and we have to give them credit for this because there is this half-truth that's baked in. A legitimate portion of these guys are absolutely fucked. I'm going to be completely honest with you. And it's like, it's the equivalent of fat people saying they can't lose weight and that they have a thyroid problem. And we know like 99.9% of them are completely fine. Only like 1.1% of people have the thyroid problem. where they're legitimately obese because that's the same. I feel like that's the same shit with that incel movement, is that a very, very, very small percentage of them are really legitimately fucked, dude. Like, you look at that guy and you go, holy shit, I'm glad I wasn't born looking like that. Being completely honest. For the most part, for these dudes, it's psychological. For the very select few of them that are genuinely ugly, what they say is true for them. There is almost nothing these guys can do. They would have to extreme max out the wallet just to get past the physical looks, the psychological squirreliness, and all the other negative points against them. And that's luckily one option men have. You're never going to find true love. That Disney thing is not real. No woman's ever going to look at you and just, be with you through the thick and thin. That shit's fake, dude. You have to have a certain level of competence for your woman to stick around. That's just the brutal truth that we as men need to understand. Once you unlock a level of confidence, you start to unlock a level of women. So these guys are just going to have to deal with the fact that once they max the wallet out, they can get a woman, but she's never going to love them. But we're all technically in that boat anyway, in some way or another. But there is a small portion of these guys that are dealing with these issues and that are completely screwed. I'll just be completely honest. Nobody's going to be honest enough to say this shit out loud because, hey, I don't know, they depend on the fan base. They depend on like farming views for anger and just keeping the guys like coming up on their fucking 10 ways to dress to get laid. And here's 6 programs that will get you women. Talk to them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these guys are building a machine to feed these dudes that have absolutely no chance with women so that they can, enrich themselves. But it is what it is. The guy the guy that did the massacre, I think it was in California, the one they call the real king of incels, I forget his name. I just remember he had a BMW and he was that rich kid and he thought he was owed women and he went on a little spree. Like, if you objectively, I forget what his name is. If you objectively looked at the guy, he wasn't ugly by any means. Again, that's another great example of it being psychological. See, his brain turned to mush by diving deep into these communities and being radicalized, just like, women tend to get radicalized in the new wave of the gynocracy where they're so extreme against men and all men are perpetrators and predators and all that stuff. And then they develop this weird seed in their head, this line of thinking that causes them to act out in ways that just push men away, which then further reinforces the negative thoughts that they have in their head. So these guys are dealing with similar things that you may be a normal dude. This is why you got to be careful. You may be a normal guy, man, and you do have potential. And you're just a few small changes here and there, adjustments to being successful with women. And this is where most dudes are. Most dudes are in this box, that they are just some adjustments away, a little bit of self-improvement away from getting a woman. You just need a mentor, a dude to teach you. And so these motherfuckers with their courses on how to get women make so much money. But once you make these adjustments, you will be fine. Like 99% of you fall in this category. You're not doomed. There are things you can do legitimately to help yourself. And that's where most men fall under. And I truly believe that. Dealing with all the messages, all the dudes I've been talking about these specific issues and everybody that's contacted me off the channel, whatnot, I truly believe that's the issue. Especially when you factor in a passport and upping your SMV by just going overseas and becoming exotic. I mean, you won't know until you get that book and travel overseas. But if you did a little bit of work on yourself, you will reap the benefits, especially in the world today. I understand it's harder in the West, that the other side is also being radicalized. But in general, man, it's not a lost cause for most men. But the danger is when you get inside these communities, you get planted with that negative seed that tells you you're less than, that tells you you're screwed, that tells you society has lied to you, and then it feeds you a narrative, unfortunately. And you have to be careful of the red pill, the manosphere, and all these fucking communities that just sprout up, and all the future ones that'll sprout up. You have to be careful because there's a certain narrative that's always being pushed, and most of the time contains half-truths and examples of things you've experienced directly that further reinforce the idea, that can get you down the rabbit hole, which in turn will make you physically act out in a certain manner and give off a certain energy, and just the way you talk to people that will put off the very thing you're searching for. This is why I tell everybody to be careful who you get your information from. Make sure they walk the walk. Make sure everything they say, they do. Careful with all the grifters and everybody in the community that's just looking to make a quick buck. repeating ad nauseum, just fucking shit that they've heard from everybody else. They were never out there being successful, doing it themselves and seeing what worked and what didn't. And unfortunately, they gather huge crowds and huge followers because, again, it's just a symptom of how lost men are today. I mean, before I started this channel, I was just of the mentality of the guys that are failing with women have to be absolutely fucking stupid. How could you possibly fail with women? It's not that hard. You just have to put in some work. Go to the gym, work out, bro. Go out there and approach. Constantly fail. Get over the psychological barrier of approaching a woman. Stop being afraid. The more you fail, the better you get. Eventually, you fine-tune your quote programming, and then it's just 10 out of 10. It's easy. You run it on autopilot. But it's not true because I started learning, well, not all men were raised with fathers. Not all men had another man to teach them how to be a man. Not all men went to college and experienced the college life or had an incredible roommate like I did. That's become my brother that pushed me out into the nightclub, that pushed me out into parties that I could learn from, that I saw with my own two eyes, somebody running game, somebody being charismatic and copied it and made it my own. I had someone to mimic. I was placed in positions and experiences in venues where I could see it happen. And I got out of my shell of being a little hermit and introverted into being extroverted. And then not losing so much mental energy from being around people, not constantly needing to like regress back into my room and rather play video games and not do shit all day. And, you know, the life I was living is a variation of the life you guys were living. Before college, man, before I actually went to college, I've told this story many times. I was in my room all day, played video games all day, was skinny as shit, had pimples everywhere, eating the worst food, had a bullshit job getting like $7, $7.50 an hour, if that. I was working at essentially like an AutoZone. It's called an Advanced Auto Parts on the East Coast of the United States, but it's a little car parts store. No direction in life. All my friends had moved after high school to colleges or we just lost contact. My phone, I would remember, man, having my cell phone and it would not fucking ring for anything. If I maybe ordered an Amazon package, a email would come through telling me that my package was delivered or out for shipment. That was it. I remember not a single fucking message, only if I called my parents for whatever reason, maybe I needed something or they called me. That was it, bro. My phone was dead. There was no notifications. Could open my phone, no fucking notifications for days, weeks on. I remember that. And now my life has completely shifted, a complete 180. My shit rings all the time. I'm constantly surrounded by people. I'm surrounded by family. I just retired them over here in Romania. I'll be coming out with a video on the other channel showing that. That was an incredible life moment for me. But all of this to say, man, is that if you just put in the work, 99.9% of you, please don't fall into that mentality thinking that you're fucked, because you're really not. You gotta be, something's gotta be like medically wrong with you. You have to be just dead ass ugly as shit, bro. And that is statistically just super fucking rare. I'm saying that there's hundreds of millions of us. So eventually a community of all those guys will get together. But most of you are dealing with this shit on a psychological level. You just need to retune your brain and then fix your body. And that could be done. That's something that is 100% in your control. And this is what I've been telling you guys this entire time. This is something you have full control of. It doesn't matter that the West is going to shit, that the pond you're fishing in sucks, that you weren't raised without a father, yada, yada, yada. I get it. All this shit is happening to you, and there's still something you can control. That is your body, and that is your mind. You start to fix those two things, you'll make the game much easier on yourself. We've always said this on the channel, man, plenty of times. Work hard in your 20s so that you could play in your 30s. Because it's hard. It's a handicap when you're 20. Women don't give a fuck about you when you're in your 20s. Let's be honest. Unless you got like Chad level genetics, you're going to get passed up for the older guys. You don't have the money to facilitate dreams, experiences, and lifestyles. It's just the reality of the fact you're broke as shit. The only women you're going to get are either busted down cougars or other horny classmates in college. That's about it, if that. And now with the advent of, or I should say with the infection of social media and dating apps at the level it is today, even those chicks in college are now all getting older men, getting flown out, getting experiences. You don't even have to get flown out. You can just go to the local lake house, the local millionaire. I mean, these dudes are just farming up college chicks left and right. That's just the reality of the nature of the beast that we're in today. It's no longer relationships, it's situationships. It's sugar daddies and sugar babies. It's hookah and chill. It's You know, it's a complete mess, man. I totally understand. But if you retune these 2 things I've told you about, you can make a massive difference. And a bunch of dudes have, by the way, and there's plenty of it. The proof is there. All of the guys that have done the Spartan challenge, most have failed, which is fine. But the fact that they went and undertook the challenge for 6 months, I've seen complete turnarounds in their entire lives. From the jobs they've had, to massive raises, to massive weight loss, to weight gain, to new relationships, girlfriends, new lives. Completely everything has changed for them. Small adjustments made day by day over time lead to and yield massive results in your life. Believe me, I'm one of these people. I lived it. I'm telling you. I wish I could find a picture so you could see just how fucking skinny and nerdy I used to look playing Halo 2 with the boys for like 14 hours a day, waking up at like 3 in the afternoon, going to bed at like 5 a.m., day in and day out, gaming non-fucking stop. That was my life. The reason I rail against all this shit is because of how many hours, experiences, memories I lost out on living in the digital world. That's why I say personally it's not worth it. Some of you guys could say, yeah, it's fine. I game here and there. It doesn't affect my life. That's cool. That's good for you. But unlike you, a bunch of other men that are currently unhappy with their situation in life need to put that shit down in order to go down the journey of self-improvement, at least temporarily. I advocate you do it only after you've completed your journey, and that's when you've earned your reward to do whatever you want, because you've most likely attained the skills of self-control so you could game without it taking your entire day, or without consuming adult entertainment, or drinking all the way down to the bottom of a glass, you know, whatever vice you have. That's why I say cut them all out. In order to achieve that transformative process, you need to completely wipe the slate clean of all your bad vices. And you know, that's one of the hardest parts of that journey. But again, it's just a 6-month promise to yourself. So for all the men that have done the Spartan Challenge, salute to you, brothers. Happy to see it worked out so well for so many of you. And for those that are currently undergoing it, keep grinding day by day. And for those that are thinking about it or haven't even begun yet, I highly implore you to. It is worth it. Anyways, I'll stop rambling on and on. This was a good one. I enjoyed talking about this topic because I lived it. And if you got any other examples for episodes to cover, please send them my way with the email down below. And if you haven't, please join the Discord server. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. Hey everyone, if you have a minute, please head over to legionofmen.store and grab yourself some cool merch as well. We have a bunch of limited edition designs, brand new stuff on the way, and all the proceeds go to supporting the channel. We don't want to be sponsored by corporations where we have to submit videos for review, have our speech impeded, or push any products that we don't use. So thank you so much to everybody that goes into the shop. Again, it's legionofmen.store. I'll put it up here for you guys. First time customers get a 10% off, and we have a bunch of great designs by artists from the community that watch the channel and support. They get proceeds as well, a percentage of everything that gets sold. So community funded through and through. Again, appreciate you guys.